Empty shelves, scattered food, a sense of urgency. Maria clutched a loaf of bread to her chest, her child clinging to her leg. Her eyes darted around, a mix of fear and relief. She had been walking for days, her stomach gnawing with hunger. The journey to America had promised a better life, a chance for her child to thrive. But the reality was harsher than she imagined. Finding food and shelter felt like an insurmountable task. Today, desperation had driven her to cross a line. She never imagined she would be in this position, stealing food to survive. The raid, though chaotic, had given them a glimmer of hope. The supermarket, now a symbol of desperation, stood in a neighborhood forever changed. A wave of migrants had washed over its streets in recent months. Fleeing violence, poverty, and persecution, they arrived seeking refuge. They carried with them little but hope, their belongings stuffed in worn-out bags. Many had journeyed for weeks, sometimes months, to reach this point. The trek was arduous, fraught with danger and uncertainty. They crossed borders, traversed deserts, and braved treacherous waters, all for the promise of a better tomorrow. Some were escaping gang violence that terrorized their communities. Others were fleeing economic hardship, their livelihoods shattered by failing crops or lack of opportunities. But the city that promised sanctuary often felt like a concrete jungle. Navigating a new language, customs, and bureaucracy proved daunting. The migrants, many arriving with limited resources and support, found themselves thrown into a vortex of uncertainty. Finding affordable housing was a monumental challenge. Families crammed into overcrowded apartments, sharing cramped spaces with strangers. Others sought refuge in homeless shelters, already stretched thin by the city's existing housing crisis. The struggle to secure employment was equally daunting. Language barriers, lack of recognized qualifications, and limited work permits created formidable obstacles. Many resorted to informal jobs, accepting low wages and exploitative conditions just to make ends meet. Food insecurity became a harsh reality for many. Maria, her hand still clutching the bread, thought back to the life she left behind. It wasn't perfect, but it was home. She had a small shop selling handmade goods. She had a community, a sense of belonging. Leaving had been a heart-wrenching decision, a last resort driven by fear for her child's future. She had dreamt of a life where her son could go to school without the threat of violence, but the reality was far from the idyllic picture she had painted in her mind. Carlos, a young man who had risked everything to escape gang recruitment, found himself trapped in a different kind of struggle. He worked long hours in construction, his body aching, his spirit slowly breaking under the weight of his circumstances. The city, once a beacon of hope, now felt like a cage. The stories of Maria, Carlos, and countless others painted a stark picture of the challenges faced by those seeking refuge. The supermarket raid sent ripples through the community. News spread like wildfire, leaving residents and businesses in its wake. Some reacted with shock, their perception of the once familiar neighborhood shaken. The sight of empty shelves, a stark contrast to the usual abundance, sparked conversations at dinner tables and local cafes. The incident became a tangible representation of the struggles faced by the new arrivals. Some businesses, grappling with losses from the raid, expressed frustration and concern. However, amidst the shock and uncertainty, a wave of compassion began to swell. In the heart of the neighborhood, community centers and nonprofit organizations sprung into action. Volunteers, their hearts moved by the crisis, opened their doors and extended a helping hand. Food banks, accustomed to serving a steady stream of individuals, found themselves inundated with requests. Shelves, once overflowing with canned goods and pantry staples, were rapidly depleted. But the spirit of generosity proved even stronger. Donations poured in, bags of groceries, gently used clothing, and essential toiletries. Doctors and nurses volunteered their time at makeshift clinics, providing basic health care to those who had gone without. Teachers offered free English classes, recognizing the importance of language in navigating their new surroundings. Language barriers and cultural differences presented unique challenges, but the community rose to the occasion. Volunteers, armed with translation apps and a genuine desire to understand, worked tirelessly to bridge the communication gap. They listened patiently, deciphered broken phrases, and ensured that the migrants' voices were heard. Cultural sensitivities were acknowledged and respected, fostering an environment of trust and mutual understanding. Food distributions were organized with an awareness of dietary restrictions and preferences. Volunteers familiar with immigration law offered guidance on legal rights and resources. The community's efforts extended beyond merely providing material aid. They sought to empower the migrants. Amidst the collective effort, Angela Harris emerged as a true pillar of strength and compassion. A longtime resident of the neighborhood, Angela had witnessed firsthand the struggles faced by the new arrivals. Her heart ached for the families torn apart, the children deprived of basic necessities, the dreams put on hold. She refused to stand idly by while her community grappled with this crisis. Driven by an unwavering belief in social justice and a deep sense of empathy, Angela dedicated herself to advocating for the migrants. She organized food drives, collecting donations from local businesses and residents. She rallied volunteers, inspiring them with her infectious energy and unwavering commitment. Angela understood that true support went beyond addressing immediate needs. She partnered with local organizations to provide essential services, from healthcare to legal aid. The supermarket raid, a stark image seared into the city's consciousness, served as a wake-up call. It forced a deeper examination of the challenges faced by urban centers grappling with an influx of migrants. This wasn't just a local issue, confined to one neighborhood or one city. It was a microcosm of a global phenomenon, a reflection of the complexities of migration in an increasingly interconnected world. The incident laid bare the limitations of existing social safety nets. It highlighted the need for comprehensive solutions, addressing not just the immediate needs of the migrants, but also the long-term implications of their arrival. The supermarket raid was a call to action, urging for a shift from reactive measures to proactive strategies. The arrival of a large number of migrants placed a significant strain on the city's already stretched resources. Housing, healthcare, and social services, designed for a specific population, struggled to accommodate the sudden influx. The city's infrastructure, already grappling with the demands of a growing population, was pushed to its limits. Affordable housing, a scarce commodity even for longtime residents, became even more elusive for the newcomers. Hospitals and clinics, accustomed to serving a certain number of patients, faced overwhelming demand. Schools, tasked with educating the next generation, grappled with overcrowded classrooms and a shortage of teachers. The city's social services agencies, often understaffed and underfunded, struggled to keep up with the rising demand for assistance. The search for safe and affordable housing became a constant source of anxiety for the newly arrived migrants. Many, fleeing poverty and hardship, arrived with limited financial resources. They found themselves priced out of a housing market that was already unaffordable for many longtime residents. Families crammed into overcrowded apartments, sharing cramped spaces with strangers. Others, unable to secure even these meager accommodations, turned to homeless shelters. The shelters, designed as temporary solutions, became long-term residences for many. The lack of affordable housing had far-reaching consequences, impacting not just the migrants' physical well-being, but also their mental and emotional health. The arrival of a large number of migrants, while often met with compassion and support, also led to tensions within the city. Longtime residents, grappling with their own economic anxieties and uncertainties, sometimes viewed the newcomers with suspicion and resentment. Competition for jobs, housing, and resources fueled these tensions. Rumors spread, often fueled by misinformation and prejudice, painting the migrants as a drain on resources. These divisions, exploited by those seeking to sow discord, threatened to undermine the very fabric of the community. Bridging these divides required open and honest dialogue, addressing fears and concerns while promoting understanding and empathy. The supermarket raid, a stark reminder of the desperation faced by many migrants, ignited a call for action. Advocates, community leaders, and concerned citizens rallied, demanding policy changes to address the root causes of migration. They argued that Band-Aid solutions, while essential in the short term, failed to address the systemic issues that fueled this crisis. They called for comprehensive immigration reform, urging lawmakers to create legal pathways for migration. They emphasized the need for increased funding for social services, recognizing that investing in housing, healthcare, and education for all benefited the entire community. The challenges faced by the migrants in the city were not isolated incidents, but rather symptoms of a larger global crisis. Wars, persecution, climate change, and economic inequality forced millions to flee their homes each year. The supermarket raid underscored the need for international cooperation and shared responsibility. Advocates called for increased humanitarian aid to countries struggling to support displaced populations. They urged nations to uphold their obligations under international law, providing refuge to those fleeing persecution and upholding the rights of all migrants. The supermarket raid, widely covered by media outlets, sparked a wave of public discourse about migration. However, the narrative surrounding the incident often veered into harmful stereotypes and generalizations, fueling fear and division. Advocates recognize the urgent need to challenge these narratives, to shift the conversation from one of blame and scarcity to one of understanding, empathy, and shared humanity. They organize public awareness campaigns, sharing the personal stories of migrants, highlighting their resilience, their dreams, and their contributions to society. They partnered with artists, filmmakers, and storytellers to create compelling narratives that humanize the migrant experience, challenging viewers to confront their own biases and embrace empathy. They facilitated dialogues between migrants and longtime residents, creating spaces for open and honest conversations that fostered understanding and challenged prejudices. They emphasized the economic, social, and cultural contributions of migrants, showcasing how diversity enriched communities and strengthened the social fabric. Changing the narrative, they argued, was essential for creating a more welcoming and inclusive society, one that recognized the inherent dignity of all people, regardless of their place of birth. The images from the supermarket raid empty shelves, desperate faces, a child clutching a loaf of bread, linger in our minds. They serve as a stark reminder of the challenges we face as a global community, challenges rooted in inequality, displacement, and the struggle for survival. It's easy to get lost in the statistics, the headlines, the political rhetoric that often surrounds the issue of migration. But we must remember that behind these abstractions are real people, individuals with families, dreams, and aspirations, seeking a better life for themselves and their loved ones. The migrants who entered that supermarket weren't criminals seeking to exploit the system. They were human beings driven by the most fundamental of needs, the need to feed themselves and their families. Their actions, born out of desperation, call upon our collective conscience. They challenge us to look beyond our own borders, our own comfort zones, and recognize the interconnectedness of our shared humanity. We are all part of a global community, and the struggles faced by one group inevitably impact us all. As we've seen, the response to this crisis has been multifaceted, a mix of fear, anger, compassion, and a deep-seated desire to help. It's a testament to the complexity of the issue, the range of emotions it evokes, and the potential for both division and unity. The path forward requires empathy, understanding, and a commitment to finding solutions that uphold the dignity and rights of all people. Let us choose compassion over indifference, understanding over judgment, and work together to build a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.